Chapter 1 Origins. Year 28 after the Dark Portal. Year of the Cataclysm. Borealis. My name is Flynn. Born and raised in Borealis, and still here to this day, as you can see. My father was a sailor for the Proudmoore Admiralty. Honorable man, or so I've been told. I was just 2 when he died. Too young to have any real recollection. Helen, my mother, inherited the family home down by Mariner's Row after his passing. It was small, shabby, floorboards creaking with every step and the wind howling through all the cracks, carrying with it that briny smell of the sea I've grown so accustomed to. The only things that weren't in disrepair were the mementos to my father. His shield and tabard shone above the fireplace. Proudmoore coat of arms on full display. Pictures adorned every wall. The house was like a shrine to him. It was about the only good thing back then. The early years were rough, as was the neighborhood. We could barely make ends meet, not for lack of trying. Mom worked long days as a chambermaid at the keep. They were sympathetic to her after my father died, I suppose. She'd take me with her at first, but as I grew a bit older, I would spend most of my days trying to peddle bits and bobs by the Ashfane docks, just to tie us over. There were usually more fights to be had than coppers, to be honest. The docks were a sprawling mess of activity. Industry, trade, thugs and deviants, all coalescing, vying for space. It felt like the city was trying to swallow me at times, closing in, ever bustling on and on while I tried to squeeze my way through any narrow gap, looking for opportunities. No place for a kid my age, or my size. Still, learned some valuable lessons there. Well then, finally, after sundown, I'd come home with my usually meager earnings. I'd start a stew containing whatever leftovers I'd managed to scrounge or barter that day, and there, sitting by the crackling fire, the smell of brine in the house finally pushed away by the bubbling stew, my eyes would drift up to my father's mementos. My nerves finally calmed, and as I fell deeper into the chair, so too did I sink deep into my daydreams. My father and I would be away on some far-off adventure, braving the wilds of Kalimdor, sharing a table at an inn with a band of soldiers on the far end of the known world, or sailing the high seas. Anywhere but here, really. And he would be just as he was in the pictures, my father. And those were my memories of him. Not real, no, but comforting. He was there when no one else was, when no one else could be, and he would offer an escape. A glass fell somewhere, which shook me from my reverie. I looked up at the man sitting across from me, and a feeling of self-consciousness came over me. I apologize for my rambling. It's foolish, I know, a children's fantasy. I know better now. I fumbled for words, then realized I was doing the very thing I had just apologized for. Instead, I looked down and nursed my pint of White Grove Pale Ale, the froth long settled. "And did you?" the man asked. His kind eyes were watching me patiently. "Find your escape, I mean." In a way, as I grew older, must have been about 12 or 13, my mother met a man at the keep, Dwen. He traded, trades, in all kinds of ores just down the street from here. After a while, we moved from our home up to Tradewind's Market. The house didn't reek of driftwood, I didn't have to scrounge for food, and our clothes only had the appropriate amount of holes in them for a change. And all the while I resented him for it. I was young, rebellious, frustrated, call it what you will. Dwen was the living embodiment of everything I hated about the city. A bustling trader, always bartering over prices, contract shipments, but never stopping to think about the story, the adventure behind it all. How one day a shipment of fell iron ore came in. Fell iron! From beyond the dark portal! Didn't even bat an eye. All he was interested in was the market value. To be so close to adventure and the wider world and not even have the curiosity to look up when the cart of ore trailing past you is glowing with fell energy. Frustrated me to no end. He was everything I hadn't imagined my father to be. Yet here he was trying to be mine. He didn't deserve the flack I gave him, not in the least. He provided for my mother and me at a time when I couldn't. Gave me a good education late in life when few could afford it. He even tried to get me interested in his business, but I just... well, it didn't grab my interest. And he put up with me to boot. I'm ashamed to say that was a taller order than any of the shipments coming in. It wasn't fair, no, cruel even, to compare him to a father I dreamt up in my head. Well, he was there trying to be a real one, to make a difference. We get along fine now, him and I. I'm glad of that, and it warms my heart seeing Mother content after all these years. Winds be kind, she deserves it. Took me a good few years to realize that, to settle down. I spent those days bouncing around the back alleys of Borealis, sometimes quite literally. I said it cheerily, although I recall the actual memories being all but cheerful. That is, until Wesley here took pity on me. I motioned to the bar, where I saw Wesley serving up another round of drinks. I nursed my wounds here, drank ale to numb the pain after another rough day, and I'd listened to the wild tales all the adventurers in the inn would tell. And let me tell you, they were wild. And a mage who swears there's a haunted tower where spirits reenact an opera every night. And there was this one time a dwarf swore on his battle hammer that, and I quote, a giant mechanical fell-infused monstrosity, tall as a mountain, would come up out of nowhere and attack him before he had any time to react. Swears up and down it didn't make a sound before it started wailing on you. Only got away by the skin of his teeth. Taller than a mountain. Mechanical and stealthy to boot. Not sure I believe that one. But those stories kept me coming back alright. One night Wesley here came up to me and said that, well, if I kept fetching drinks for every other thirsty adventurer, I might as well get paid doing it. Been here for the better part of 2 years now. About as close to adventure I can be without actually stepping foot in one. That is if you don't count the drunken alley fight. My nerves calmed with age, but I remain restless, even now. We sat in silence for a moment. I got the impression he was giving me time to continue, should I wish. After a while, he chimed in. I was much like you when I was younger. Restless, a thirst for adventure. I joined the army when I was about your age. It's only later that I found delight and became a brother at the abbey. I took another swig and collected my thoughts. Strange, I thought to myself, my feelings, my story, had been my own for as long as I could remember. I never bothered telling it, or perhaps no one had bothered asking. Yet here I was, laying my soul to bear to a man I had met only just this morning. Wesley had asked me to help offload some cargo. Barrels of wine, as a matter of fact. I was hauling them off one of the ships when I heard a man yell, "Careful with those! Northshire Vineyard's finest! And possibly some of its last." He grinned and jumped off the ship, surprisingly spry for an older gentleman, and started helping. "Tell your innkeep to stock some in his cellar, cool and dark. I imagine they might be worth a pretty copper in a few years." "No can do," I smiled mischievously back at him. "I don't care for the stuff, and they'd be taking up space that could be filled with good ale." You're just saying that because you've never had the wine from Northshire. Any man from the Eastern Kingdoms will tell you it hits different. He gave me a solid pat on the back as he trudged past me with a barrel. Either way, I told him, you've just had me believe these are some of the very last barrels. And now you'd have me develop a taste for them. No, sir. He laughed heartily at that. I suppose you're right, son. Awfully evil of me. As we were hauling everything to the carts, I couldn't contain my curiosity. Why are these some of the last barrels, you say? He pondered for a moment, looking out over the ocean. Son, that story would take time. And perhaps some of that ale you mentioned. He left me no time to feel disappointed. I know you're not fond of the wine, son, he said, smiling. But if you go any slower, it'll be vinegar before I get a chance to prove you wrong. Not gonna have an old man one-up you hauling these barrels now, are you? That got me back into gear. We jested and jeered for the better part of the morning, and my spirits were lifted more than any wine or ale had done in the past few months. After everything was offloaded, I thanked him, genuinely, for his help, and we bid each other farewell. I had supposed that would be the last of him, and unless the wine proved to be so wonderful, we'd place another order. That is, assuming they weren't the actual last barrels. But to my surprise, he showed up at the inn, just as I was finishing my shift later that afternoon. And here we were. We shared that ale we talked about, and another, and a bowl of stew, traded stories, we laughed, talked of life and love. Conversation came easily, and for a brief moment the crackling fire and the smell of the stew wafting through the inn took me back to that house on Mariners Row. It was just as I had imagined being with my father, far away in that exotic inn, so when he'd asked about me, my story, I felt comfortable sharing it for the first time in a long time. One thing still gnawed at my curiosity, however. Brother Paxton, about Northshire, you mentioned the vineyard? Haven't forgotten about that, have you? Well, it's only fair. We did have that ale after all. I have to warn you, son, you might find my story as unbelievable as you did that dwarf's. I shifted forward on my seat now, eager for more. About a week ago, as twilight fell, I was drifting off to sleep, having to get to the Stormwind docks early to head here, in fact. Must have just caught sleep when all of a sudden I woke to the earth trembling, heaving. It was so intense I felt any minute now the world would split itself into two. That's when I heard it. A terrible, agonizing roar. Just as quickly as that started, it stopped. I stumbled out of my room and found the abbey still standing as by some miracle. The light must have truly shone upon us that day, as I felt surely no structure could have survived. My mind raced as I tried to rationalize what was happening. An earthquake, perhaps a landslide in the mountains surrounding the valley. Running outside, I found Brother Niels with a blank look on his face, seemingly staring into the distant horizon. I tried to shake him from his reverie, asking him if he was okay, what had happened, anything. I was just contemplating if I should try to slap him back to his senses when he uttered, "Dragon? Lava dragon?" I couldn't make any sense of what he was saying. I figured he must have been too far into his cups and was just about to scold him for being drunk at the worst of times when he pointed at the horizon in the distance. I glanced up and that's when I saw it. Against the falling darkness, off in the distance, an immense trail of fire, and at its head a blazing monstrosity. It was like a raging volcano had decided to take flight, spewing lava and destruction in its wake. Its body, if you can call it that, was like a furnace, Cement's wings large enough to cover all of Elwyn in one fell swoop. A dragon? On fire! Large enough to cause an earthquake. I gathered myself as I saw Brother Paxton's grave expression. Aye, son. Deathwing, they call him. At least that's what I heard the next day as I ventured into the city. To be honest with you, I was surprised to find it still standing. You see, as Neil and I were staring at the beast in distance, we saw it swoop down on the city. I thought for sure it would obliterate the city and all those in it. Such ferocious unbridled power. It's like nothing I'd ever seen. I was all too relieved when I made my way there by morning and found the bustling capital still alive and kicking. Not unscathed, mind you. It destroyed the entire park and left a crater in its wake. From what I had heard, it hadn't taken it more than a few seconds. I see your eye, son. If you think I'm in any way exaggerating, I'd be keen to take you with me to Stormwind. You can see its claws burned red hot into the watchtowers. For reference, those claws are just about as big as the very guard towers he was perched on. No, I thought for sure the city was doomed that night. In fact, it was all people could talk about when I arrived the next day. The guards I spoke to swore the beast could have laid waste to everything, if it so pleased. You see, Stormwind had always been a bastion for the Alliance, and the king himself had his seat there. When I saw the dragon that night, I figured he was in any way at odds with the Alliance. That's where he'd strike. For some reason, it settled for annihilating just a part of the city. Just blew it away like it was nothing. I spent much of the journey here contemplating that. Now, perhaps I feel that it was just sending a message. Making clear that it could swat us from existence like a bothersome fly should he so wish. If he succeeded in anything, it was instilling fear. The entire city was rampant with it. The thought that he could show up at any point and blast us away, the end of all time, strikes fear in any courageous heart. Brother Paxton shuddered at the thought and grabbed the last of his ale for courage. At this point, my head was spinning. I had heard some frightening tales before, but this... Wes? We're going to need another round here. Best bring out your strong stuff. Wesley gave me a curious look, then shrugged and filled up 2 tankards of Hook Point Porter. Brother Paxton seemed to steady himself after a while. That wing, he also destroyed the vineyard? Not exactly, no. After a while, Brother Neil and I were shaken from our trance by cries for help. We spent the better part of the night assisting the residents of the abbey. Much damage had been done to the surrounding countryside. Panic and confusion gripped everyone, as you can imagine. Remarkably, the vineyard was relatively untouched. At dawn, however, I got yet another bit of troubling news. Marshal McBride, the commander of the Northshire garrison, approached me. His scouts had worked throughout the night to survey the damage. The mountains surrounding the valley, once thought impenetrable, had shifted significantly with the upheaval. It seems a corridor has opened up in the north, leading through to the burning steppes. Yep, the burning steppes are just about as pleasant as they sound. Hot, dry, covered in volcanic ash. Not exactly your Azeroth top 5 vacation destination, unless you're a volcano enthusiast. The worst part, it's riddled with orcs. The Blackrock clan. I had the pleasure of fighting them once, when I was in the army. Their savagery is legendary. Unlike the Horde we know today, the Blackrock still keep to the old ways. The bloodlust. They've been raiding Alliance lands for years, and my home could now very well be their next target. I fear when that happens, the one tranquil valley of Northshire will be turned into a war zone, and I can assure you, war zones are not the most conducive climate for a vineyard, or anything for that matter. Paxton looked solemnly into the fire, his eyes glazed in memory, recalling some past horror. I pondered for a moment and wondered. You think he's in league with the orcs? tore up those mountains to create a passage? Tore up? No, lad. He happened to clap his wings as he flew over them. With the knowledge of what could await us, I hadn't planned on going anywhere anytime soon, regardless of my original plans. The valley was in need, and McBride had already received the missive that supplies of manpower and Stormwind would be spread thin for a while. We weren't the only kingdom in uproar, so it seemed. I figured my place would be in Northshire for the coming weeks, if not months, to get everyone back on their feet. The first night, it had already become painfully clear that we would not have the resources to repair the damage, and I was scratching my head thinking of ways to gather more supplies when I realized my venture to Borealis might just be a gift in disguise. Originally, I'd only planned to deliver the wine you and I bonded over this very morning. Maybe bring a load of Tiragard sharp back, but then it hit me. Just south of here lies the Stormsong Monastery. I'm sure you've heard of it. Have you been? Anyway, Brother Alan resides there as a Tide Sage. We fought together in the Second War, and we've kept correspondence ever since. Over the years, we've talked much about our respective orders, and I'm hoping they will be charitable to our cause. I was relieved upon my arrival here to see Kultiris had been spared. I chartered a ferry there at first light tomorrow. I'm to be back on the ship in a mere 3 days' time, hopefully with much needed supplies. Well, fair wind and full sails to your venture, Brother Paxton. May you find all you need. Can I confide something in you, son? Of course. I'm quite scared for the journey back. Before we left, when I was in the harbour, all kinds of disturbing messages started flooding in. As if a giant earth-shattering dragon was not enough, it seems not only had Deathwing caused natural disasters on a cataclysmic scale throughout much of the world, the shamans in the city said that he had burst forth from the elemental plane and, by doing so, tore some sort of rift between that very elemental plane and Azeroth. The inner workings of that are well beyond me, but the general gist is it doesn't bode well for the world at large, even after his initial rampage has stopped. Fire, earth, water, air, the very elements themselves are in uproar. I'm not only scared of what I'll find, but when sailing here, it felt like the very sea was trying to swallow us. It felt aggressive, somehow. I nodded in agreement. Past few days, travelers from all parts had reported roiling seas, and these last nights had brought in storms on a scale unseen for years. I can't imagine having to sail through that. Is it worth the risk? Brother Paxton hesitated for a while. He looked unsure if he should continue. Well, at first it seemed my journey would not take place at all. Every ship had been commandeered by the Alliance to assist with the relief effort, you understand. Anything not absolutely essential was put on hold. I tried to convince the harbour master. I explained my intent to request help from the Tide Sages, but to no effect. Stood there arguing for a solid 10 minutes until I was overheard by a group of shaman. They were from an organization called the Earthen Ring. They strive to preserve balance between the elements, or so they said. Well, with the elemental plane being in complete uproar and all, balance was hard to come by, as you can imagine, so they were looking for any means that might aid them in their effort. As you well know, the Tide Sages are renowned for their ability to calm the seas and their connection to the water itself. Let me tell you, it needs calming. They intend to seek their guidance, possibly acquire artifacts or other ways of communicating with the elements. So, they lobbied some people in high places and off we went. And I can honestly say I was happy to have them along. They were able to guide us through the roughest patches on the high seas. I'll be convening with them tomorrow before we make our trip to the monastery. After that, we'll organize any aid to be carried onto the ship and make our way hurriedly back to assist with the relief effort. I pray the Abbey is still spared upon my return. Your company is much appreciated this night. I couldn't stand another evening of tossing and turning for hours in my sleeping quarters like I had to do for much of the journey here. I plan on heading back only when I'm good and tired. Perhaps I'll drift off to sleep quickly without brooding over what might be. To that end, he raised his tankard high. To your good health, my young friend, and many merry adventures to come. Before drinking deep. To Northshire Abbey, I replied. May its citizens be safe and prosper for years to come. As he put his tankard down, Brother Paxton said, You'd be very welcome to visit, should a sense of adventure come calling. The people are kind and welcoming, and a strong young man like yourself would be able to help many. You'd find a good meal and a warm bed. Perhaps I'll even sell you on that glass of wine. Although this, he nodded to the tankard in his hand, is not half bad. That does sound like a merry adventure. We talked for a few more hours, trading wild theories about Deathwing and what was to come, the horrors the common folk no doubt faced with his emergence. Until, finally, it was time to say goodnight. We said our goodbyes and shared a last hearty handshake before stepping into the cool ocean breeze outside the inn and going our separate ways, promising to meet again when next Brother Paxton would be in Kultiris. If, I thought to myself. That night I found myself tossing and turning, much like Brother Paxton had described. But it wasn't Deathwing that kept me awake, not in particular anyway. I found myself thinking of Northshire Abbey, its people, the vineyard and the beautiful serene forest just beyond its borders. So different from the bustling city I could still hear outside, even at this hour. So different from any place in Kultiris. At least, that I'd been. And in my mind, one sentence played on repeat. You'd be very welcome to visit. I had played it off as a polite courtesy at the time, but Brother Paxton had seemed very genuine. And so I found myself finally drifting off, dreaming of magnificent trees, lush glades and beautiful birdsong. The very next morning, my mind was made up.